Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Sponsored once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots. It is I, Megan, your favorite, sometimes co-host, sometimes fill-in for Pastor Matt Shea here on Patriot Radio. I'm excited to be with you guys today again. But fear not, after today's intelligence briefing, you will be blessed with an interview with Alex Newman and Pastor Matt. So it is not just me on today's episode. Do not worry, you get the best of both worlds today. But if you guys would like to keep up with daily intelligence and breaking news, please go ahead and follow us on Telegram at patriotradio.us/Telegram or scan the QR code on your screen. And if, while you are following breaking news and daily intelligence on our Telegram feed, you feel overwhelmed or afraid, fear not, because we have a team standing by waiting to pray with you. Please contact us at patriotradio.us/prayer if you are in need of prayer for anything. We would love to partner with you in prayer. And that brings us to today's wisdom from the Word, coming to you from Matthew 7, verses 24 through 27. Anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse, because it is built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rain and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. I was reading this morning and really felt the fear of the Lord on this verse, because he's talking about anyone who listens to his teaching but also follows it is a person who builds their house on the solid rock that will stand against the trials of life. But if you listen and you don't obey, you will be swept away by the events of this life, and things will push you away from the Lord. And I think the key here is obedience. The key is that we listen and we obey because we love the Lord, not because he forces us to, but because we get to obey the Lord's commands, and that is a blessing. And without further ado, your favorite thing for me to do here on Patriot Radio is my version of the Daily Intelligence Briefing, coming to you from the China front. Now, I know this is called the China front, but we're going to go ahead and start in South Korea, because South Korea has developed a stealth attack drone for the Ghost Commander 2 carrier to enhance its naval strike capabilities in high-risk maritime zones. Now, I'm not exactly sure what this means for the South Koreans, other than the fact that, good for them, they now have stealth attack drones. Amen, hallelujah. Now, I'm not really sure if this next article would fall under the Middle East front or the China front, because it has to do with Filipino kidnapping victims, but we're just going to go ahead and roll with it right here. The U.S. Embassy in Yemen states that the Houthi terrorists have kidnapped several surviving crew members of the Eternity Sea cargo vessel, and I believe that this ship did go down in the Philippines after killing their shipmates, sinking the ship, and hampering rescue efforts. The Houthi terrorists have kidnapped many surviving crew members. We call for their immediate and unconditional safe release. The Houthis continue to show the world why the United States was right to label them a terrorist organization, and we pray that those people are returned home. And that brings us now to the official Middle East front. Now, when I saw this article, I have to admit, I did chuckle a little bit because it reminded me of Madagascar, you know, that cartoon, and where the penguins are trying to break out of the zoo and they like dig a hole and they have like a cup that covers the hole. This article reminded me of that because 20 migrants from Afghanistan dug a tunnel under the fence, tried to sneak from Belarus into Poland. It's been reported that border guards were attacked. Tell me now how, I'm assuming grown men, fit through that hole if they actually got through. I don't know if they finished digging the tunnel or not, but tell me that doesn't remind you of Madagascar. I find this quite funny, and I am waiting to see their plastic spoons that they used to dig this hole under the fence, like little chihuahuas trying to escape the yard. My goodness. And coming to us from the Insider paper, Iran threats within UK significantly increased. The threat posed by Iran in the UK has increased, with Iranian spies behind more than a dozen attempts to kill or kidnap British-based individuals since 2022. Parliament's intelligence warned on Thursday. The UK government response has been too focused on crisis management, while concerns over Iran's nuclear program have overly dominated the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament, which they concluded, yeah, this is a problem. This is what happens when you let people into your borders with absolutely no vetting, no processing. You are going to reap what you sow. And Europe has been opening their borders for a long time to these immigrants. And unfortunately, it has taken many horrific events of their own citizens being attacked in their streets for them to wake up and realize, hey, maybe this is a problem. Maybe we should not continue to do this. And I pray that they continue to wake up and tighten their borders and make the UK safe again. Next, we have an article that honestly breaks my heart, coming to us from the Jihad Watch. Afghanistan, Taliban stops a 45-year-old man from marrying a 6-year-old girl and force him to wait until she is 9. Right, so she's 6, let's wait till she's 9 because that's better. And in this picture, it's quite small, but you can see this poor little girl. She looks absolutely terrified. But a 6-year-old girl has allegedly been forced to marry a 45-year-old man in Afghanistan after she was given away for money. A haunting photo of an older man and a little girl standing together horrified even the Taliban, who intervened with the union. She had been exchanged for money by her father to a man who already had 2 wives. The marriage was allegedly set to take place on Friday. The Taliban stepped in and arrested both men involved. No charges were brought against them, but have forced him to wait until the girl is 9 before he can take her home. The UN reported last year that there has been a 25% rise in child marriages in Afghanistan after the Taliban banned girls' education in 2021. They also said there has been a 45% increase in childbearing across the country. In the same year as the Taliban came to power, after the U.S. heavily criticized exit, a 9-year-old girl who was sold by her father to a 55-year-old man as a child bride was rescued by a charity. Now, this absolutely breaks my heart, but they're making him wait until she's 9 because that's when Muhammad consummated his marriage with Aisha. He waited until she was 9 because that's when she officially became a woman in their eyes. And now we would like to... I just don't understand why we're defending Islam in America when this is clearly what they stand for. This is clearly what the religion stands for. Child brides. How awful. And I don't even want to mention the fact that her father exchanged her for money, because that's all women are good for to them. Money and exchange and childbearing. My gosh, absolutely heartbreaking. And that now brings us to a very interesting national front. In breaking news from the leading report, the DOJ and FBI are withholding a treasure trove of information related to Jeffrey Epstein, according to victim attorney. Now, I don't know if any of you guys have been following the recent updates on the Jeffrey Epstein case, but all I know is that things are not being released. Lists are not being released. And Donald Trump did promise to release this list. Now, there has to be a good reason for them not releasing this list. And then they said that there was no client list and that there was no evidence of clients in the list that they have. But now, there has been a confirmation that they are releasing the list. So Laura Loomer said, oh, so now there's a list? Can we trust them? Can we really trust what's going on? I think the time for trusting the government to say, oh, we've reviewed it and this is what it says is over. I would like to see the actual documents. I think we have a right to see. If there are people out there trafficking children, raping children, why are these people not being prosecuted? If we have the evidence, if we have the list, why are we not seeing arrests? Why are these people not being put behind bars immediately? There has to be something that they're covering up. There must be some kind of intelligence that they're covering up because, I mean, I saw articles about people in the CIA that are involved in child sex trafficking, child solicitation, and they were not being prosecuted for fear of the fact that they would reveal sources and strategic ways that they go after these people. But this is an absolute circus, you guys, and I believe that we all have the right to see what was going on. Did Epstein kill himself? If there was no client list, why would he kill himself? Just doesn't make sense to me. Now, I'm sure you guys have all heard of the big, beautiful bill with the giant federal tax cuts that have been going on. But in specifically the state of Washington, buckle in, you guys, because this is what is happening. Washington taxpayers give Planned Parenthood $59,509,373 after the big, beautiful bill cut federal funds to the organization. Governor Ferguson vowed to backfill the cuts with state taxpayer money despite $720 million shortfall after passing the largest tax increase in Washington history. Fantastic. So after this great success of defunding Planned Parenthood nationally, where national taxpayer money will not be funding the murder of innocent lives, thank God for Governor Ferguson. Because now, the great people of Washington State and our taxpayer dollars will be going to fund Planned Parenthood. I want to move to Idaho. Thank you, Governor Ferguson, for showing who you really are, and that is absolutely atrocious. Now, still on the area of Seattle, from the Cho Show, hundreds of people are walking past a homeless woman in downtown Seattle suffering from frostbite. She's missing fingers and toes. And there's only one outreach worker who has stopped to help. Where are the city-funded workers? Where are the taxpayer dollars going to help the people on the streets of Seattle? Where are those going? Clearly not to help the people in need. This is absolutely heartbreaking. And we're just walking by like this person doesn't even exist. But this is what's going on in the streets of Seattle. If you were wondering, it's a crime fest down there. I saw an article earlier where elderly people are now walking around downtown Seattle with canes that double as tasers because they're afraid for their safety to get mugged in the streets of Seattle. Absolutely outrageous. And when we come back from the break, more from the National Front.
What if I told you you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with more from the National Front. Breaking. Donald Trump's DHS blocked Democrats from filming the outrageous conditions at detention facility known as Alligator Alcatraz. Oops, my bad. Turns out it was actually Republican Senator Ted Cruz in 2021 trying to expose the conditions inside Obama-era cages filled with illegal immigrants under Biden. Democrats didn't care about those facilities or the immigrants back then. They only pretend to care now because it serves their anti-Trump agenda. If Democrats didn't have double standards, they'd have no standards at all. And what I find interesting about this is I've seen videos on social media, on Instagram, of people saying there were children who were American citizens that were being deported by ICE. Okay, yeah, maybe those children were American citizens, but you know who wasn't an American citizen? Their parents. And since we're all up in arms about splitting families up, their parents are illegal immigrants. So therefore, when their parents get deported, guess who goes with them? Their children. Otherwise, we would be splitting families. And if they are US citizens, when they are adults, they may return. But if we would like to keep them safe and out of the foster care system, or homelessness, just an idea, let's send them with their parents. But that's why they're being deported. And I find this absolutely hilarious that they're saying that this is Alligator Alcatraz when in fact this is Obama-era cages. Quite interesting. Now, on a funny note, guys, when I tell you I cracked up when I read this, I really did. Okay. We welcomed you. We created nonprofits to help feed, clothe, and find housing. We did everything we could to make your transition here easier. And this is how you repay us? By stabbing us in the back, said Katerina Stackpool, a lesbian former city council member, after her Muslim successors voted to block the display of pride flags on city property this June. Yep. And you're surprised? You are surprised that your Muslim successors said, we don't support homosexuality. Do you realize that gay people get killed in countries where Islam rules? This is why I say the people that are fighting for Palestine and fighting for Islam to be accepted in the United States, girl, if you wore what you're wearing to that protest there, they would kill you. If you used they, them pronouns where you're fighting for, they would kill you. When we were talking about the child bride, I recall saying that they banned the education of women in 2021. So not only would you not be able to go to school there, you would not be educated, but you're at a college protesting for Palestine. Right, okay. And you're surprised that they wouldn't let a pride flag fly on city grounds? Tell me why it makes sense. If you read the Quran, if you paid attention to the regime that's in power right now, if you paid attention to what's actually going on, how they're treating the people of your kind, the LGBTQ, let's not pretend that that is an accepting religion. Let's not pretend that that's an inclusive religion, because it's not. They have proven time and time again that it is not. So I don't understand why we're all acting surprised. It's not a surprise. It's actually really funny. It's very funny to me. Because honestly, I don't think pride flags should be flown on city property. I think the American flag should be flown on city property. So I guess I agree with them there. Don't agree with killing them. That's for sure. But my goodness. Anyway, moving on. I'm done. I'm done with that. Sorry. Little rant. Anyway, coming to us from the libs of TikTok. And I know this has to do with Canada. Okay, I understand that. But since it's going to be the 51st state anyway, we might as well talk about it. Camille Habel, a staff sergeant for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, said that if you lean toward traditional values, that might be a sign of, wait for it, becoming an extremist. If you have traditional values, you believe that marriage is between one man and one woman and anything else is not correct because you can't alter what God created. Okay, if you believe that, you know, you want to be a housewife and you want to have children and you believe that there is only one God and you believe that, you know, there are roles in society that should be fulfilled by men and roles in society that should be fulfilled by women. Guess what, guys? According to this woman, you are an extremist. So watch out because they're coming for you. Because you're an extremist. Shouldn't believe in traditional values, guys. My gosh. Absolutely unbelievable. All right. This is maybe not so much on the national front. I would say the European front, but sorry, my article is out of order. But I'm still going to talk about it. New German crime statistics show that young Algerians living in Germany are now 56 times more criminal than their German counterparts. However, the statistics are still skewed and are certainly much worse as immigrant youths with German citizenship and second-generation migrants are placed in the category among ethnic Germans. Some German politicians are now calling for a change to the way crime statistics are gathered and presented, demanding for Germany to follow the Danish model, which has statistics on the crime rates among Danish citizens with a foreign background. The already shocking new German crime statistics show that young non-citizens commit crimes at a rate that far exceeds the majority of the population. Are we surprised? I'm not. I'm definitely not surprised, guys. Like I said, Europe, open borders. This is what the Democratic Party wants to do in the United States of America. If we do that, this will happen here. And we already kind of saw a little bit of it during the Biden regime. Remember that lady that ate somebody's cat? That was crazy. Okay. Back to the national front. Sorry, guys, a little backtrack there. The new DOD just withdrew the nomination of Admiral Michael Donnelly for Vice Admiral and Commander of the 7th Fleet after discovering he permitted drag shows on board the USS Ronald Reagan, according to the Daily Wire. Okay. That's interesting. Is that what we're paying people for? Have drag shows on naval ships? Okay. I'm really glad that they withdrew his name because is that how they pass their time? Less woke stuff in the military, the better. Thank you, Jesus. Moving on. Riding on ice, not recommended. I have a video here of an Omaha protest attempts to stop ice raid at Nebraska meat processing plant. And this guy just plows over these people. He just keeps on driving. So it's not recommended that you stop them from trying to do their jobs because, guys, they're just doing their job. That's why they exist. They will run you over. It's clear. Look at that. He's just going right ahead. Wow. I pray that they stay safe and continue doing an amazing job keeping this country safe. And if you think you can stop them, well, clearly you can't because they will just keep driving. Moving on. Also from libs of TikTok, woman describes how she was groomed as a minor to undergo irreversible gender-affirming care. This is an interesting one. She hadn't even learned algebra in high school yet, but she was old enough to choose to have healthy parts of her body effectively amputated. This is absolutely heartbreaking, you guys. And this is the danger of letting children choose gender-affirming care for themselves. You can't drive a car, you can't get a tattoo, you can't buy cigarettes, you can't drink. But yeah, you want to chop your boobs off and call yourself a boy? Absolutely, you're old enough to do that. Sorry, but when I was in elementary school, middle school, I wanted to be a mermaid. I pretended that I was a fairy. I wanted to be an animal. But you know what? That was in my head. And I feel like this fad has taken a turn that is dangerous. It's quite dangerous. We are quite literally letting children choose to mutilate themselves. And is it really them choosing if they're children, or is it the parents' fault for allowing a child to choose to mutilate themselves and giving them the ability to actually do this? It's also the healthcare provider's fault. Children are doing this to themselves everywhere, but in all honesty, I can't find it in my heart to blame the child, because I find the adults in their life quite responsible, because as a parent, you are charged with the health and safety of your child. And if this is the direction that you're choosing to let your child walk in, you're like, yeah, absolutely. Chop your boobs off. Do it. Chop your wee-wee off. Absolutely. Do it. You are a boy. You are a girl. We are literally fueling their delusion instead of getting them the help that they need. And if I, as a child, had gone up to my mother and said, Mom, I'm a boy, she would have looked at me and said, no, you're not. Look at your parts. You're not a boy. And shut that down immediately. They are children. They just need a strong leader in their life. And my final article for you today for the briefing is the Chinese Communist Party has acquired 2.2 million acres of American farmland. We have huge problems. 2.2 million acres of American farmland. I know you guys have heard Pastor Matt and I talk about how the Chinese war, model is for them to fight to their supplies. Yeah, they're fighting to their supply chain. 2.2 million acres of American farmland. Why are we letting them own it? I don't know. But I think we should switch that up. And that is today's daily intelligence briefing from me. I know it was a little chaotic. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. I had a good time. I hope you had a good time. And after the break, our guest, Alex Newman.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today. And we're back with our guest today, Alex Newman. He's senior editor at the New American Magazine, also the founder of libertysentinel.org. Great news source. If you've never heard of it, subscribe online, and it's a great place to find the things that people really aren't talking about. And one of those we're going to talk about today is the Bilderbergs. Alex, it's always great to have you on Patriot Radio. Thanks for being back, my friend.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So you've been covering the Bilderberg meeting. A lot of people, again, are kind of like, it's not that big a deal. There's no formal agenda. They always try to say that. There's no real formal agenda. We just have some discussion topics. And shouldn't we all get together to discuss the issues of the day? What say you? What is this really about?
Well, the Bilderberg meeting, I call it one of the key institutions within the deep state, behind the deep state, along with the Council on Foreign Relations, along with the Trilateral Commission, and then some of the weirdo secret societies like Bohemian Grove and Skull and Bones at Yale University. And so the Bilderberg just got done meeting in Stockholm. A lot less prominent Americans in federal government service this time than is normal, which I think is a function of the Trump administration being there. There were some members of the Trump administration, although not very many senior people. There was a couple of military officers, although none of the key people were there. And then there were some of the people who are kind of not technically in the administration, but who are at least playing a big role in influencing the administration. And two of the guys that come to mind, Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, two of the tech bros who have only recently become very MAGA. We ought to be
Right.
very suspicious of that, I think. So Peter Thiel is the homosexual, supposedly libertarian tech bro, one of the PayPal mafia guys. And he's been saying some really weird things. I think he's trying to sound MAGA, and trying to sound like Christian, but he's kind of like pretending like transhumanism is somehow like the next step in the evolution of Christianity. Some really, really weird stuff. And then, of course, Palantir, which is led by Karp, who was also at the meeting this time around. Palantir, I would consider it to be almost part of the government. I mean, technically, it's a publicly traded company. Technically, you could buy stocks on the stock exchange or whatever. But they now have access to a lot of the government, the data that the federal government has vacuumed up on us from across departments. By the way, they're sucking this all up into Palantir, and they're using very, very advanced computing to come up with all kinds of insights on basically every person in the United States. So these are some of the really big players that were there. We don't know exactly what they talked about. We never do, but they did give us a list of talking points. Depopulation was on there. AI was on there. And typically what happens at these Bilderberg meetings, we know because people have talked about it. I've talked to Bilderberg members about this. I've got them on camera admitting that they are there in a public capacity, that they are there working on policy. And basically they're trying to plot humanity's future without our involvement. And that's totally unacceptable in my opinion.
It is totally unacceptable. I want to hone in on this. I mean, when somebody says AI and depopulation in the same sentence, I kind of start having some questions come up in my mind. And I think we all should. Why would they be talking about depopulation? I mean, we see the demographic decline in everywhere, actually, in Europe and then also in China. People are actually talking about the opposite, that we need to really incentivize family again and incentivize, the 3-child household so that we can maintain civilization. Why are they talking about this? And did you get any inkling of the real agenda behind that?
I reached out to a lot of people to try to get some insight into what they thought was meant by the term depopulation, and I got a lot of answers from all over the map. You're right, we do have a depopulation crisis right now. Most of the world's countries today are below replacement levels when it comes to fertility, and I believe that was engineered that way. I believe the globalists did this on purpose. They propagandized women to believe that having children was bad, and that if they were going to have children, they should at least wait until they're like 49 and then maybe start thinking about the possibility of kids. Oh, whoops, you can't have kids anymore now that you're 50. Oh, that's too bad. Better luck next time. So I think this was engineered this way. I also think they are bombarding our biological systems with chemicals that they know result in reductions in fertility. And we've seen the data coming out about this when it comes to sperm count, when it comes to the stuff from the COVID injections, the effect that it has had on women's reproductive systems. I believe this has been deliberately engineered this way, and we do have a demographic catastrophe staring us in the face. From the globalist deep state evildoer perspective, I think they love this. First of all, they hate human beings because we're made in the image of God. And second of all, I think they justify this to themselves by saying, well, hey, AI is going to take most of their jobs anyway. And I mean, what kind of life is that going to be? Just to be stuck in your little box, eating your nourishment cubes, playing video games and taking drugs, as Yuval Noah Harari, the senior advisor over at the World Economic Forum, says. So I think they believe in depopulating the world. One of the things that I heard mentioned from several people that I reached out to, some on the record, some off the record, people can't always talk about these things openly, depending on where they are in government or whatever. But the Deagle report, the Deagle forecast that projected that in 2025 we would see unbelievably catastrophic declines in population. The United States Deagle 2025 forecast has 99 million people. Right? We currently have about 350 million people. So that's a lot of dead Americans. And we don't know what that means, right? Frankly, I've talked to a lot of people who have theories. I don't claim to know. You probably have some ideas too, Matt. But I suspect that they understand, the Bilderberg types understand that we're headed toward a demographic collapse of population. It's not just Europe anymore. Africa is basically the only region of the world that still has a fertility replacement above replacement level. And in Africa, of course, is being targeted with all kinds of population control schemes. Bill Gates and his buddies got caught in Kenya. Technically, it was an accident that we don't understand, but they were doing a vaccine program for tetanus, neonatal tetanus, where only young women and girls were eligible to receive these injections. And there was a Catholic group, the Kenya Catholic Doctors Association, obtained samples of these vaccines. They were being distributed by multiple UN agencies, including UNICEF and the World Health Organization, all funded by Bill Gates. And the Catholic doctors sent these injections to laboratories around the world. Every single one tested positive for beta HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, which is a hormone that a woman's body needs to be able to carry a pregnancy to term. And I actually talked to a lady who did Rockefeller-funded research in the 90s using that very hormone in vaccines to cause women's bodies to react against that hormone as if it were an invader that needed to be destroyed so that they couldn't carry pregnancies to term. So I don't believe for a second that that was an accident. In fact, all the Catholic bishops in Kenya came out with a statement and said, this wasn't a vaccine program. This was a covert sterilization program. So I think the depopulation is being engineered for very specific purposes, and we are all in the crosshairs.
Yeah, and almost prophetic that the Georgia Guidestones were blown up, which, for those that are not familiar, there was a very clear statement that the world need to be depopulated all the way down to, 600 million or something like that.
500 million. Yeah, and that was at the top, right? That was one of the top agenda items.
Right. I mean, just an incredible statement. So what happens to the other 7.5 billion people plus on the planet, right? And the Deagle report, I find it fascinating with that, because the immediate question is, okay, what did you base this projection on, right? And if it matches a speech by General Chi Hoshin or Chi Watian, depending on how you want to pronounce that, in 2000 to depopulate the United States by 200 million, I got to start asking some questions. Are you basing this on something that the communists are actually working on in China? Like, I don't know, another genetic bioweapon that targets a specific genetic profile. I mean, that's where I would go with that. Or do you know about a war that's going to be started in 2025 way ahead of time?
I think what you just touched on, Matt, is really critical to understand. The idea of creating genetic weapons that target a particular gene profile is not new. In fact, South African researchers were working on this many, many decades ago. How do we create biological weapons that will only target certain people? And we know the Communist Chinese, as you just pointed out, have a desire to depopulate the United States. They want to keep the infrastructure here. They want to keep the farmland fertile, but we're in the way, right? And so we know that the U.S. government has poured billions and billions of dollars into their biological weapons programs under the guise of research. Wuhan, for crying out loud. We've got them under oath testifying that they were funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan with our tax dollars. The National Institutes of Health, totally out of control. This is criminal activity. You might even call it treason. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they were working on something like that. I also wouldn't be surprised if they were planning to kick off some sort of major global conflagration, possibly involving China, possibly involving Russia, possibly involving India, Pakistan, possibly involving the Middle East and Iran. We know they love war. We know that war is one of their catalysts for accelerating the cause of globalism. And we know that Americans and historically Anglo-Saxon countries with the attachment to these ideas from like the Magna Carta and King Alfred, and our incredible history where we took Christianity and we infused it into every area of life, including government. That is the number one target of the diabolical evildoers who want to enslave humanity. And when you look at the Deagle report, the countries that are primarily affected are the countries that historically have been bastions of this kind of Protestant Christian thinking, where the Bible is infused into everything. And you got the United States, you got the United Kingdom, you've got the Netherlands, Scandinavia, Germany, like all these countries are. And you look at Russia, China, and Iran, their populations aren't even affected. So something fishy is going on here. I don't know what it is, but I think all of those are hypotheses worth considering. And I would certainly hope that people at the Pentagon are looking into this right now.
Yeah, I would hope so as well. And, I want to take a step back for a second. I understand the strategy about what President Trump is trying to do. I believe all strategy obviously needs to comport with the Constitution of the United States. But with that said, I understand the strategy of depriving China of the economic ability to wage war through tariffs and to deprive them of the ability to fuel a war by trying to turn Iran into a Western, pro-Western country again, like it was before the Islamic Revolution in 1979. I think 20% to a quarter of Chinese imports of oil are from Iran, and I think it's 91% of Iran's exports are actually going to China. So I get that at kind of a visceral level. It really does seem, though, that China is hell-bent on a war in the Pacific, and with all the purges that have been going on lately, and some high-profile ones that people not being in the public eye for 2 weeks at a time, like President Xi or Chairman Xi. How do we process this as Americans? And I mean, what do you think the way forward is? Because China really does see the United States as its mortal enemy.
It does, and they have been preparing to wage war against us since before either of us was born, Matt.
Right.
If you go to China, you see they still teach children in school that Americans are the enemy, right? That someday there's going to be a glorious war for liberating humanity from the evil imperialist capitalist oppression of the evil American system, and so they absolutely plan to do this, and we've had whistleblowers who've come out, many of them over the years, and reveal that is essentially their plan, right? To bring the entire world under the domination of a communist Chinese style system backed by the CCP. Anatoly Golitsyn, the defector from the Department D in the Soviet KGB, revealed that they had this long-range plan. The Sino-Soviet split was a fraud from the beginning, and that there'd be a fake collapse of the Soviet Union, a fake collapse of communism in Eastern Europe, and then the grand finale of all this would be a second October revolution, where the entire world would then be enslaved under a Russian, Soviet-style, communist Chinese-style system. And I think, unfortunately, people hear that and they think, wow, that's really bad. We better build up our military in America. And yes, that's a sensible response. But unfortunately, our government has been feeding this monster with endless amounts of money, endless amounts of technology. And now they're suddenly using China as the excuse to turn America more into China, which is crazy, right? The same people who've been building up the communist Chinese threat are now saying, wow, look how scary communist China is. Now you have to give up all your freedom. Wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. So I think that is their objective. And I think once the CCP feels like they are capable of winning a war against us, which, sorry, Americans, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think that moment is much, much closer than any of us would like to believe. They will start it. And it'll probably look like a local conflict between Taiwan and China to begin with, but that will very, very quickly mushroom into bringing in the Philippines and Australia and Japan. And before you know it, global conflagration with huge numbers of people dead. And frankly, the CCP doesn't care how many of their own people they kill. They're disposable slaves, right? They're just animals. They have no soul, right? What do we care if we murder another 100 million or another 200 million people? It's for the glory of communism. So Americans really need to wise up to this stuff. These are all existential threats.
They are. I heard that one time before. Why would the Chinese hurt their own people? I'm like, man, they've killed tens of millions of their own people. What are you talking about, right? Yep. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Council on Foreign Relations, its influence inside the government, and also, can we really trust that the globalists are going to allow Trump to continue doing what he's doing in the Middle East?
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
We're back with our guest, Alex Newman. He is the senior editor at the New American Magazine and also the founder of Liberty Sentinel, libertysentinel.org. Alex, I love your investigative reporting, and, many of the conspiracies that we have talked about over the years are now fact. I know some people don't really want to admit that, but it's the truth. One of those that I was told about a long time ago, 20 years ago, the Council on Foreign Relations. It's just a club of people who want to better our world. Why do you keep railing on them? What are you really afraid of? And maybe it's jealousy. Maybe you just actually want to be a part of it, Matt. And that's why you're talking about it. And obviously none of those are true. There's some serious concerns about the Council on Foreign Relations and its influence in the Trump administration. I think we need to talk about that, and we need to be honest about it. So what is the scope of that infiltration into the Trump administration right now?
Well, I'll start with the good news. There's a lot less CFR tentacles in the current administration than there were in the first Trump administration, and there's way less CFR moles in the Trump administration than there have been historically in Republican or Democrat presidencies. And so that's the good news. The bad news is there's a lot of CFR members and CFR hangers-on who are serving in very, very key positions in the Trump administration. The first one that I'll mention, who frankly concerns me probably the most in this administration, is the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, the active homosexual, married to a man. Somehow they got some kids. Proud member of the CFR, former bigwig at George Soros's operation, and now supposedly Mr. MAGA. I, for one, am not buying it. And I understand people can change. I changed, right? I was a terrible, terrible person before I came to know the Lord, and so very grateful to God for that. As they say, but for the grace of God, there go I. But I have seen no evidence of repentance from Scott Bessent. I have seen no evidence that he has repented from his evil. He talks more MAGA today, but does he really believe it? And one of the things that I expect is going to happen during the Trump presidency, I don't know when. I'm not a future predictor. I don't claim to be a prophet. I don't have a crystal ball. So, I'm just connecting dots here based on the evidence that I see, is some sort of massive economic crisis with the dollar, with the markets, we've heard from David Webb about the Great Taking, where they've got a plan now and they've legalized it in all 50 states to basically confiscate all of our securities in the event of some sort of catastrophic global economic problem. That would be bad enough with a really great Treasury Secretary. Having a CFR guy there, tied to George Soros at the hip, makes me very, very concerned. And unfortunately, he has wooed a lot of MAGA world. Oh, well, he's with Trump on the tariffs, and, he's said nice things about gold every once in a while. Folks, let's not be deceived here. So I'm very concerned about the influence of Bessent. I think we are headed for an economic crisis that the globalists, the evildoers, hope to use to bring in, if not a full-blown global currency, at least the infrastructure to finalize that system. I mean, they've been working on turning the IMF into a global central bank since I've been in journalism. I did a cover story on that in the New American back in 2010. It was all in the open. The Chi-Coms were supporting it. The Treasury, the U.S. Secretary, Timothy TurboTax Geithner, was supporting it in public at the CFR. So that's their plan. Of course, they have the Bank for International Settlements right now, building the international blockchain ledger, where you won't be able to buy or sell unless you've got your CBDC and your digital ID, and it's all at the international level. Everything is tokenized. Every asset in the known universe will be a token on this ledger, and you can only interact with it through this technocratic system. So I think Bessent is the perfect mole to bring this all in. And, if he had come out and said, hey, guys, I can't believe I got caught up in that CFR thing. That was terrible. These are evil globalists. They're trying to destroy America. Now I've trusted Jesus Christ. I'd say, okay, I'll hear you out. That sounds good. Maybe this is a good pick. But we have seen nothing like that from him. And so I don't trust him. There are others, too. One of the ones that was a very significant concern to me was actually Michael Waltz. He's not officially a member, but his wife is. And he's been very close to the CFR for a long time. I happen to know a little bit about Michael Waltz. He was the congressman for a district that I spent a lot of time in. And, we sounded the alarm here locally. To give you some sense of where he's at, he broke with the Republican Party to enshrine homosexual so-called marriage into federal law when they thought the Supreme Court might undo that rogue, crazy decision. He actually is probably the single biggest proponent of drafting my daughter within the Republican Party. And I'm sorry, but that's a hill to die on. You're not drafting my daughter. She is not going to fight in your forever no-win New World Order wars. It's just not happening. So he's a bad guy. I was pleased to see him demoted from National Security Advisor. They're sending him off to political Siberia at the UN, which
right.
Good luck with that. But those are two that really bother me. And we saw this in the first administration, Matt. One of the ones that I had my eye on was Lighthizer, right? Robert Lighthizer. And I warned from the very beginning that this guy was going to be bad news, the U.S. Trade Representative. And of course, true to form, just like a good Council on Foreign Relations globalist, he engineered the USMCA, which basically was NAFTA on steroids. He duped Trump, I believe duped. I know a lot of people think Trump must be in on this. I don't believe that, but he convinced Trump that this was necessary for our farmers and for our industries. Maybe economically it was a little bit of a better deal than NAFTA, but it expanded North American bureaucracies and tribunals' jurisdiction over huge areas of law that were previously off limits. So really, really bad. And of course, that's exactly what you would expect a CFR guy to do. They're the ones who came up with the idea of a North American community. Robert Pastor came up with the idea of a North American union. So, good news, a lot less CFR operatives than normal. Bad news, there are still quite a few, and they're in very key positions in this administration.
What one concern that I had was Marco Rubio and his connection to the Aspen Institute. He graduated. He's winning one of their classes. And people are like, what is the Aspen Institute? Well, it's actually, I believe, the vetting organization for the Council on Foreign Relations, or one of the vetting organizations for the Council on Foreign Relations. And you can see a consistent action and message from people, both parties, that come out of that. And I think that we need to start asking some questions. What is this? Not representative of the vast majority of Americans, but there's clearly an agenda behind it. And some people get really offended when we begin to ask questions, but shouldn't we ask questions of our elected representatives and where they've been taught and what their sources are?
We absolutely should, Matt. And it reminds me of what the Bible says, right? Don't put your trust in men. Don't put your trust in princes. I like a lot of what Trump has done, and I've been vocal in supporting some of what he's done, but he's not God. He's not Jesus Christ. And so he is a fallen, fallible human being. And this whole idea that we have to rally behind our leader like we're some kind of cult like the Democrats did with Barack Obama is ludicrous. And it's the antithesis of everything Republicans historically have claimed to believe. So, when Trump does well, we should applaud him. When he does something wrong or appoints somebody dangerous, we should ask questions. We should speak out. We should pray for him at all times, just like we should have been praying for Joe Biden and all the rest of them. The Bible commands us to pray for those in authority, that we may lead quiet and peaceable lives. But this whole idea that there's politicians who we can't ask questions of, who we can't criticize, frankly, that's something that belongs in tyrannical societies, not in the United States.
I think asking the right questions makes us all better, makes us all grow. And one of the people that's doing that is Catherine Fitz. She had an interview late April with Tucker Carlson, a very level-headed, evidence-based analyst. She was in the Bush administration. She left the Bush administration, became a member of the board for Sallie Mae. And while she was on that board, had an interesting exchange with somebody else who was on that board, who came up to her and said, it's time for you to join the CFR. Handed her a colored brochure. And she said, I can't do that. And he says, well, you don't understand. You don't understand. People go see this interview for themselves. You don't understand. If you don't do this, you're going to be out forever. And so now she is raising the alarm, kind of tying all this together, not just about the CFR, but she's raising the alarm about that the government may know of an extinction level event, going back to the Deagle report that we talked about at the beginning, that the government may know of an economic collapse coming and is preparing for that with underground bases. Now, I personally have had a whistleblower who knows of one, was there, come and tell me about these things. And, to a certain extent, the government admits they exist. I mean, Cheyenne Mountain, Mount Weather, they admit that there are these things out there. They say, well, it's not to the extent all these other people are saying. Well, then the question becomes, why do you have all of these bases? What's the purpose for them? How do you analyze Catherine Fitz, and is there credibility with her and her testimony?
I think she has enormous credibility. I think she is a very, very astute woman, one of the brightest analysts out there right now. She's actually going to be one of the speakers at the John Birch Society's leadership event coming up in September in Pennsylvania. Anybody who's out there, I will speak there. General Michael Flynn will speak there. It's going to be a great event just outside of Philadelphia. So come hear her in person. But she is absolutely brilliant. She's got a lot of information that is not accessible to normal people. And when she puts that together with what she already knows, I don't necessarily agree with her on everything, but I think her analysis and her warnings need to be taken very, very seriously. And, some of the things that she shared with Tucker Carlson, a lot of those are things that you and I have known for a long time, but it's really great that millions of people now who weren't aware of this are being exposed to it, because that's our best chance, I think, absent divine intervention, of stopping these evildoers.
Well, the biggest thing is the secret underground bases. That is admitted, that is factual that they exist. Is it to the extent that she's really talking about? What have you read? What have you analyzed? And I know you're a huge network. You've talked to people that have brought this up. How do you approach this issue?
It is real. It is huge. We've known about it for some years. There are a lot of people involved, obviously, and it's hard to keep that many people quiet. And it's not just in the United States, by the way. And the globalist billionaires, they know this stuff. They are right now building themselves underground bases. They are right now buying tens of thousands of acres with airstrips in remote New Zealand, far, far away. They know something is coming, and they're preparing. And they are absolutely planning to leave you to die. So I actually interviewed Vincent Peter Pry, the chairman of the Congressional Task Force investigating EMPs. He said EMP strike very likely on America. It would kill 90% of Americans within a year. The government knows this. It would cost them $5 billion to harden the grid, but they don't care. That's how much they send to Pakistan every year, to give you some perspective. But they won't fix it because they've all got a plan B, and they don't care what happens to you.
Incredible. I think that's going to be another episode, but for now, Alex Newman, thank you for joining me on Patriot Radio today. TheNewAmerican.com, LibertySentinel.org. Really appreciate everything you're doing, and as always, keep up the fight.
Thank you, sir. God bless you.
So what can you do? First of all, I would go check out that interview. We're going to try to get Catherine Fitz on here on Patriot Radio to discuss some of these things, because it raises questions, obviously, but also, are they really going to succeed at this nefarious plan? Because it's been exposed. So what you can do, continue sharing this stuff and expose it. But also, have you prepared for the future? If, for example, there was an EMP, and if the electric grid went down and cell towers were down, internet probably would go down as well for a period of time. Would you be able to feed your family for 2 weeks, 6 months? I mean, the minimum should be 6 months. So this isn't a fear-based thing. This is, are they really planning to do something? And then, obviously, God is involved. So how severe would it be? We take the fear out of these things by just acknowledging that there is this going on out there, that there are people that sit in dark rooms with beady eyes plotting our destruction. But there is a God who is bigger in heaven. And ask him what you should do to prepare. And I submit to you, the answer is not going to be nothing, but whatever he tells you to do, you should do that, especially in the run-up to what's coming in the next 5 years. This is Matt Shea. Thank you for joining me on Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. The awakening is here. So we need to keep up the fight.